The wind howled over the rocky ridge, carrying the faint scent of scorched earth and blood. Above the battlefield, silhouetted against the pale blue sky, the Zypherian officers stood in a loose formation, their gleaming armor catching the sunlight like shards of a broken star. They laughed, deep, guttural sounds that echoed off the cliffs, watching the disorganized humans scramble below. Commander Valir crossed his arms, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "They always fight like this," he said, gesturing to the humans attempting to rally in the valley below. "Desperate, clumsy, clinging to some misplaced notion of defiance. They're entertaining, if nothing else," replied Colonel Threx, the red insignia on his shoulder marking him as second in command. He tilted his head as if listening for something. "Their pulse weapons are weak. Their vehicles are primitive. And yet they insist on dragging this war past all reason." One of the younger officers, Lieutenant Score, let out a sharp chittering noise. Zypherian laughter. "It's pathetic. I almost admire their stubbornness." Almost. A ripple of amusement spread through the group. The humans had been given every opportunity to surrender. The Zypherian dominion had crushed mightier civilizations without resistance. Yet these creatures, fragile and technologically backward, refused to submit. It was baffling. Below, the human soldiers crouched behind crumbling walls and shattered vehicles, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Their numbers had dwindled over the past few weeks, their weapons growing increasingly scarce. Soon they would break. Valir could already see it in the way some of them hesitated, the way their movements betrayed exhaustion. The officers watched, relaxed, as a small group of humans emerged from cover. They dragged a wounded soldier between them, his arm hanging limp, blood staining his uniform. Valir exhaled through his respirator, unimpressed. What is it about the species? Why do they throw themselves into battles they cannot win? Colonel Threx hummed thoughtfully. Some primitive survival instinct, I imagine. They still believe victory is possible. Score tapped a clawed finger against the side of his helmet. They must be hoping for reinforcements, or some last-minute miracle. That brought another round of laughter. No reinforcements were coming. Earth's military was shattered, its command centers obliterated. What remained were scattered remnants, insurgents without hope. The war was already decided. The humans were simply too foolish to recognize it. A human voice, distorted by a radio, crackled through the valley below. The officers listened in silence. "Hold your positions. Wait for the signal." Valir scoffed. He had studied human tactics. They relied on deception, misdirection, and emotional appeals. But there was no strategy that could save them now. Still, he found himself watching them closely. Something about their stance had changed, not quite surrender, not quite desperation. It was something else, a quiet certainty. The air felt different. Valir dismissed the thought. His kind had conquered a dozen worlds, had fought species far deadlier than this one. The humans were simply delusional, incapable of understanding their own doom. He gestured dismissively. "Let them have their last stand. It changes nothing." The officers turned away from the ridge, already speaking of future campaigns. The war for Earth was all but over. Behind them, the humans waited, and above them, unseen, something new had begun. The pulse hit without a sound. For a moment, nothing changed. The Zypherian officers remained on the ridge, still chuckling over the futility of human resistance, still basking in their inevitable victory. The sky stretched clear and bright above them. The battlefield below was silent, but for the occasional crack of distant gunfire. Then, the first helmet fractured. Lieutenant Score fell before he saw it, a hairline fissure running across his visor, a sudden, almost imperceptible vibration in the metal. He frowned, reaching up to touch his helmet's surface. His claws scraped against something that should not have been there. The material, an alloy engineered to withstand plasma fire and atmospheric extremes, was splintering like cheap glass. He barely had time to process the impossibility of it before the second crack formed, bisecting his vision. Across the ridge, Commander Valier froze. His eyes flicked to Threx, whose own helmet now bore a web of delicate fractures. A fine dust, powdered metal and synthetic polymer, began to flake off into the air. "What is this?" Threx snarled, hands curling into fists. No one answered, because now, one by one, every officer on the ridge was experiencing the same thing. Small, jagged lines creeping across their helmets, the faintest sound of stress fractures deep within the alloy. The temperature inside their suits spiked. The air filtration units, so finely calibrated to Zypherian biology, sputtered and failed in silent unison. Valier's breath caught in his throat. This was not a malfunction. This was not some freak atmospheric event. This was human design. Far below, where they had watched the enemy cower, the humans now stood motionless. Their weapons remained slung at their sides, their postures unchanged. They weren't attacking. They weren't even moving. They were waiting. A terrible understanding settled over Valier, cold and sharp. They knew the humans had done something targeted, something precise. The Dominion's finest engineers had promised their armor was impenetrable, had assured them that Earth's primitive technology could not scratch their defenses. And yet, those same defenses were now crumbling from within, disintegrating like brittle stone. Score let out a sharp, ragged exhale. The fractures on his helmet deepened. A single, paper-thin shard peeled away from the visor, fluttering to ground like a dead leaf. Then, all at once, the helmet shattered. It happened in unison, as if triggered by some final, invisible pressure. The ultra-dense alloy splintered into countless pieces, falling away from their heads like broken shells. Slivers of metal and polymer rained onto the rocky ridge, catching the sunlight as they tumbled. And beneath the protective layers, the Zypherian officers were exposed to the raw air of Earth. Valier sucked in a breath, then choked. The oxygen burned his throat, too rich, too alien. His secondary lungs convulsed. His vision swam, the edges darkening. Around him, his officers clutched at their faces, mandibles flexing in silent agony. The respirator units were gone. The chemical balance they relied on was gone. The careful separation between their physiology and this hostile world had been erased in an instant. A desperate snarl tore from Threx's throat. Seal the suits. Engage emergency protocols. But there were no emergency protocols for this. A weapon unseen, unfelt, had dismantled their strongest armor like it was nothing. The humans had studied them, had learned what the Dominion itself had overlooked. The material of their suits, so resistant to brute force, had a hidden vulnerability, some microscopic flaw in its molecular structure, something only these stubborn, infuriating creatures had discovered. And now they were using it to kill them without ever firing a shot. The battlefield shifted. For the first time, it was not the humans who were scrambling in fear. It was the Zypherian officers who staggered backward, clutching at their exposed faces, their limbs trembling. The air burned in their lungs, thick and suffocating. Their bodies, evolved for a different atmosphere, were shutting down. Below, the humans did not celebrate, did not gloat. They simply raised their weapons. The first shot rang out like a thunderclap. Colonel Threx's head snapped back, a fine mist of violet blood spraying into the air as the round punched clean through his exposed skull. His body collapsed in a boneless heap, limbs twitching once before falling still. For the first time since the invasion began, a Zypherian officer lay dead by human hands. And it would not be the last. The humans advanced, not in a reckless charge, not with the desperation of an outmatched force, but with methodical precision. They moved like hunters, deliberate and patient, every step bringing them closer to their now vulnerable prey. Valier's instincts screamed at him to run, to escape, to do anything but remain exposed on the blistering sun, lungs seizing with every breath of toxic air. His claws dug into the rocky ground as he fought for control, forcing himself to focus, to think, retreat, regroup, crush them. But there was nowhere to retreat, nowhere to regroup. The humans had stripped them of their armor, their protection, their illusion of superiority. The Zypherian infantry positioned beyond the ridge still stood in formation, but they were too far to offer immediate aid. The officers, those meant to command, were alone. Another shot cracked through the air. Lieutenant Score crumpled, his body jerking as he hit the ground, dark eyes wide with disbelief. His helmetless face, once twisted in contempt, was frozen in something else entirely. Valier turned, desperate to rally the others. Fall back. Regain defensive positions. A human bullet tore through the officer beside him. Another fell, clutching at his throat as blood spilled between his fingers. The laughter that had once filled this ridge was gone. In its place, there was only panic. The Zypherian officers had never been meant to fight like this. They were strategists, overseers, the architects of war, not its foot soldiers. They were supposed to direct from a distance, secure in the knowledge that their armor and warriors would shield them from danger. Now, stripped of their protection, exposed to the elements of a world that rejected them, they were nothing more than easy targets. Valier's vision blurred, the oxygen poisoning taking hold faster than he had anticipated. He staggered, his limbs sluggish, his thoughts sluggish. His claws fumbled at the controls of his wrist module, attempting to activate his distress beacon, but his fingers felt clumsy, unresponsive. The humans were closer now. He could see their eyes, cold, unreadable. He had mistaken them for desperate before, mistook their silence for hopelessness. But there was no desperation in them now, only certainty. A human soldier, tall, lean, his face streaked with dust and dry blood, leveled his rifle at Valier's chest. His voice was quiet, steady. "You thought we'd just lie down and die, didn't you?" Valier bared his teeth in a weak, shuddering snarl. "We are superior." The soldier's expression didn't change. Not anymore. He pulled the trigger. Pain exploded through Valier's body, a white-hot agony radiating from his torso. He staggered, choking, his body refusing to obey him. He fell to one knee, claws scraping against the rock. Above him, the human lowered his rifle, already turning away. Not even worth a second shot. Valier coughed, dark blood spilling past his lips. Around him, the last of the officers fell, one by one, until only silence remained. The humans did not celebrate. They simply moved forward, stepping over the bodies, their eyes already set on the battlefield beyond. The officers had fallen. Now, it was time to break the army. The battlefield belonged to the dead. Bodies lay strewn across the valley floor, Zypherian and human alike, the ground slick with blood of two species. Smoke curled lazily into the sky from the wreckage of alien dropships, their sleek hulls scarred and broken. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt ozone and the coppery tang of spilled life. Among the ruins, the survivors moved with quiet efficiency. Human soldiers stepped over fallen enemies, boots crunching against shattered armor, rifles still held at the ready. But there were no more shots to be fired. The battle was over. The enemy had broken. Sergeant Elias Vance exhaled, dragging a hand across his sweat-slicked face. His uniform was torn, his arms streaked with grime, but he barely felt it. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind only the dull weight of exhaustion. He turned his gaze toward the ridge, where the bodies of the Zypherian officers lay sprawled in grotesque stillness. Their shattered helmets glinted in the dying light. A fitting end. Footsteps crunched beside him. Corporal Maraholt, rifle slung across her back, let out a slow breath. "They ran," she murmured, shaking her head. "The mighty Zypherian dominion, and they ran." Vance didn't respond immediately. He had seen the retreat with his own eyes, had watched as the alien forces, stripped of leadership, lost whatever discipline they once had. Some tried to fight. Others collapsed under the weight of oxygen poisoning, their bodies failing them before human bullets could. But most had done the one thing no one had expected. They fled. Holt nudged a fallen officer with the toe of her boot. "What do you think they're telling the ones off-world right now? Think they're even capable of admitting they lost?" Vance let out a humorless chuckle. "Doesn't matter. Word gonna spread." He gestured at the bodies littering the valley. "Don't lose like this and keep it quiet." The Zypherian dominion had conquered countless worlds, bending entire civilizations under its rule. But here, on this backward, war-ravaged planet, they had suffered a humiliation unlike any in their history. Not just defeat. A lesson. A low groan broke the silence. Vance turned sharply, rifle raised, but Holt was faster. She strode forward and hauled an injured Zypherian upright, her grip ironclad. The alien officer, one of the few who had survived the slaughter, wheezed, his exposed mandibles quivering. His skin had gone pallid, his breath labored. Vance crouched, studying the creature. "What's your name?" The officer's black eyes flicked to him, unfocused. "Zor," he rasped. Vance nodded. "Zor. Good. I want you to remember this moment." He gestured at the dead, at the ruins of what had once been an unstoppable army. "I want you to go back to your people and tell them what happened here." Zor's mandibles clicked weakly. We are the Dominion." "No," Vance said, his voice calm, certain. "Not anymore." The alien's breath hitched, his body sagging in Holt's grip. He had no words left, no argument. He had watched his commanders die, his people retreat, the unthinkable unfold before his very eyes. Vance stood, nodding toward the distant horizon, where the last remnants of the Zypherian forces were vanishing into sky. "Go. Tell them Earth isn't theirs to take." Holt released her grip, and Zor collapsed to the dirt, his limbs trembling. A long silence stretched between them before, at last, he staggered to his feet and limped away, leaving his dead behind. Vance watched him go, then turned to his soldiers. "We'll bury our own," he said. "Leave the rest of the crows." No one argued. As the sun dipped below the ruined landscape, the humans remained standing, bloodied, battered, but unbroken. The first war for Earth was over, and humanity had won.